Welcome to another edition of Journey of Hope. Stories, interviews with people that have encountered some kind of a medical crisis, a medical challenge, traumatic injury, and have gone on not only to be a survivor, but a thriver. Our couple today received the sobering news: you have cancer. And they'd had some cancer in the background, so they knew what that meant in the sobering news. Our special guests today are from the Boston, Massachusetts area, Chris and Alice White. They're going to share their journey of finding out what happens when you have cancer. Chris and Alice, it's good to have you here.
Thank you.
And we have people from around the world that are watching. And why don't we tell our listening audience where you're from, where you're raised up. Where are you raised?
I was raised in Aurora, Illinois, which is a suburb of Chicago. And my parents are still there, and I have two sisters.
All right. And are they living in that area too then?
One is, and one is in Wisconsin.
Well, there's a big difference between the Chicago area and the East Coast.
That's true.
Where are you from, Chris?
I'm an East Coaster.
Are you?
A Connecticut Yankee.
Okay.
I was raised in New Canaan, Connecticut. My dad worked on Wall Street, and I went to elementary school there and then went to boarding school just south of Boston, and grew to really enjoy the city.
So you've been on the East Coast all of your life then?
Well, I went to college in St. Louis at Washington University.
Okay.
I knew there was something special about the Midwest, and
You wanted to find out
I
what it
wanted to
was?
find out what it was, and then
And what did you take in school?
geology.
Okay, that's an interesting...
Undergraduate in geology, and then I came back and got a master's in geology at UMass in Amherst, majoring in glacial geology.
All right, well then there's somewhere we're going to learn where that took a little bit of a detour, because what were you thinking about doing when you took the geology? I mean, what were your
Well, I was,
goals?
this was before environmental geology really developed, and yet I was very interested in that work. And so when I did my master's work at UMass, I really created my own master's degree by taking courses in engineering geology, and as well as in the geology department, and combined the two of them.
Okay.
But it required a lot of quantitative background, and so I took courses in math, for instance, as well as physics.
Well, we're going to learn in a second here, a couple of minutes, how you made the transition into being in financial investments and so forth. Tell us where you went to school.
Well, I started at Illinois State and actually ended up finishing at Boston College.
Okay.
So I was initially a music major, ended up getting a degree in psychology, but basically my whole life has been working as a security analyst, following insurance companies.
Okay. And you apparently had your own business at one time.
I did.
Where were you at that time?
We were in Avon, Connecticut,
Okay.
and the company basically did institutional research, investment banking, and venture capital.
All right, and you had your own company. And tell me, where did the two of you meet?
We met in Avon, Connecticut.
In Avon, Connecticut.
Yes,
all right.
Chris.
So somebody from the Chicago area.
Yeah, that's right.
Okay.
The Midwest attraction.
Yeah, that's
continued.
right. Okay. So now tell me about your family, because you told me about a father, and tell me about your father, because I mean it's kind of tied in with your journey here.
Yes, he was born in the 1914 and went to work. He started majoring in physics and went to Princeton for a physics graduate degree, and decided that it was really more than what he wanted to do, and so he went and worked on Wall Street. And,
So I had studied physics.
Yeah.
And went to Wall Street.
Right.
Again, that's kind of like there's
There's
some
a
kind
parallel.
of there's a parallel
There's
here.
a parallel
that's right.
here. That's right.
Okay.
And he worked there until he retired in the early 80s. I also pursued science. The geology, I went to northern New England, to Vermont, and started a company doing environmental engineering.
You started the company?
Yes.
Okay.
It was a very small company, but but there's an entrepreneurial theme here.
Okay.
Did that for about 7 or 8 years, doing
In Vermont.
in Vermont and New Hampshire, doing cleanup of hazardous waste, land planning, resource development, helping towns.
So
and
your
landowners.
studying, your background, your educational background did help you with that area.
Absolutely,
Okay.
it did. And what was an underlying theme for me was the concept of stewardship and taking care of people's assets. And so I confess that I started looking down beyond to the horizon, and by that time I had 2 kids, and I could see that tuition payments were going to loom large in my life. And I needed to find something that had a higher remunerative stream than consulting work in geology. So I moved to New York, in the process getting a divorce, and went to Columbia Business School, where I got my MBA. And it was very funny, in the baby finance course at Columbia, the teacher apologized because the room was full of brokers from the street who just come up on the subway. He had to go through this efficient market material as part of the course. And he started writing up all these formulas on the board, and lo and behold, they were the same formulas that I used for predicting groundwater contaminant transport, and writing software programs for that. So there's a connection.
No, I can see the transition there. Okay, I'm glad to know there was a logical reason.
Yeah, there's a logic.
Now the reason I brought up your father
Yes.
is because he was diagnosed apparently with cancer at the age of
His mid-60s.
his mid-60s.
Right.
Okay, and it was prostate cancer.
It's prostate cancer.
And tell us what happened.
He did some research. This was back in the late 70s, early 80s. He did some research and decided that radioactive seeds was really the best way to
Sure.
go, and had those implanted. And that caused the PSA to drop for about...
And it's a viable treatment for many people.
Absolutely.
But
and back then it was really
Sure.
a very attractive alternative. So his PSA dropped for about 4 or 5 years. Then it started to climb again. And I can't remember the second treatment that he had.
That he had
But there were
follow-up treatment.
3 or 4 more treatments because the cancer kept coming back.
It had metastasized and gone to different areas, and so you're watching all of this as a son.
Yes.
And one thing after another, it just kept coming back.
Right.
And did he die with the disease then?
His last treatment was when he was 80, and that.
So he lasted until he was 80 then.
Yes, and he had chemical castration. Then it lasted for another 5 years.
Okay.
But at age 85, the PSA started coming
Sure.
up again, and he decided, no more. He had lived a full life, and so at age 85, he died, and it was a very difficult death.
Sure.
Because one essentially poisons oneself, because the urethra is blocked, and you're no longer able to.
So
to
you
void.
have this background, and then you are diagnosed.
Well, I'm one of 5 boys,
Okay.
and my next oldest brother, who was 63, 64 a year ago, was diagnosed with prostate cancer.
Okay, and he underwent a
And
different
he
kind of
went,
treatment.
he went to Massachusetts General Hospital and had a radical prostatectomy and had his prostate removed surgically.
And everything's going fine.
As far as
Sure.
I know, yeah.
So, was it a surprise to you then when you are diagnosed?
Well, I have to say that when I called Alice with the news, I was laughing, which is, I know, hard to believe, but it was almost...
Hey, I got cancer.
It was almost like, the family
Here it is.
truth has come home to roost one more time.
So how did this impact you?
I was stunned.
Oh, imagine.
What had happened is the doctor had called earlier in the day. I was on my way out. It was about 8:30 in the morning, and asked to speak with Chris. And doctors never call you at home. So I knew that there was something going on, and finally I found out later in the day. So I was stunned because he was young relative to when his father was diagnosed and when his brother was diagnosed.
And you remember the father-in-law's, passed away. He had
Yes,
cancer and
yes.
metastasized. Do you have any cancer in your family?
No.
So this was horrible news.
Yes.
Yeah, very
Yeah.
sobering. He's laughing.
Yeah.
Now, is he laughing because of a nervous laugh, or hey, it's finally caught up with us, or why are you laughing? Why are you laughing?
Well, I've wondered about that, but I think there's several elements. One, I think the Lord has been very kind to me several times, and there are several times that I should have died, I think, and haven't.
He's had his hand over you.
Yeah, and so there's a feeling of, not that I'm protected necessarily, but that here's one more encounter with the Lord.
He's had his hand over you, and you're conscious of it. And here's
Very
another
conscious.
time when you're aware of that.
And so it's, in that way, it's almost as if here's another chance to encounter the Lord's power.
Oh, that's a wonderful way to take a look at this thing. So anyway, how did you learn about Loma Linda? I mean, we're on the West Coast.
You're on the
You're from
left
the East
coast, we're on the right
Yes,
coast.
yes. So how did you learn about Loma Linda? How did you make your way here to Loma Linda?
Well, do you want me to?
Yeah.
We go to church in Marion, Massachusetts, and are relatively new to this church. We had gone, worshipped in Boston, but since getting a home on the Cape, we spend all weekends down there. And we also were aware that at this particular church, after communion, there are healing ministers just outside the sanctuary. And the weekend that Chris was diagnosed, he said to me, I think after communion I'm going to the healing ministers.
This is a time where they pray for
Yes.
people that have a
Yes.
particular problem or a disease, okay?
Yes, privately.
Sure, yeah.
Away from the
One-on-one.
Yes, exactly. And I happened to notice one of the healing ministers had been sitting very close to us during the service. After Chris was done praying with them, they both came back and sat down, and she took out a piece of paper and was writing frantically on this piece of paper.
This is the wife or one of the healing ministers?
This was the healing minister. And turned around and said, "You must call this man." And she kept saying, "Loma Linda, Loma Linda." And I had
So this is in church.
This is in church.
The healing minister.
I'm going,
Well,
what?
we have people out there all around.
I had no idea what Loma Linda was.
Sure.
But what she had written down in the paper was the name of a man by the name of Bob Marchini, who was her next door neighbor.
Oh, Bob's neighbor.
And as it happened, Bob, of course, has written a book, a wonderful book on surviving
survive,
prostate
yes,
cancer.
yeah.
And so that the very next day we called him, and I arranged to pick up a book from him. We went over there, and we were actually going on a trip to the West Coast, so we both happened to read the book. And this was in the midst of reading everything we could
About
on prostate cancer. The book that I think all men read by, is it Walsh?
Patrick Walsh, yeah.
And we're looking at every aspect,
All
every
the different options.
Yes. So we had gone through that first, and then saved this book for last, and we're shocked and surprised at what Bob was telling us that was available to us at a medical center that we had never heard of before.
Now, for our listening audience, Bob Marchini is a former patient and has written this book, and he started a group called, ironically, the Bob for the Brotherhood of the Balloon. And there's 4,400 members all across the country and around the world. So you read the book.
Yes.
And then what?
We read the book, and we continued our research to make sure we covered all bases. We visited a surgeon. We visited a radiation oncologist. And, of course, being in Boston, we're very close to MGH,
Sure.
Massachusetts General Hospital, where they also do proton treatments. So we visited the doctor there, too.
So you ended up making a decision to come all the way across the country an Easterner going west, and I know it wasn't just the weather that was making.
Well, that was a major factor.
Yeah, I'm sure there were many, many factors, but you ended up choosing to come to Loma Linda. Why Loma Linda?
Well, I think there are sort of two levels of answers. The first is that Loma Linda clearly has far more experience in dealing with prostate cancer than Massachusetts General Hospital. Loma Linda started treatment with proton
we've got
beam.
close to 14,000 total patients.
Yeah, and over 10,000,
yeah.
over 10,000 prostate,
right.
starting in the early 1990s. Mass General started in 2001 and has treated only 200 patients.
A little different.
A little different. And if there's one thing we learned from all of our research is you go where the experience is, you go where the high volume is.
Okay.
So that was certainly a very important ingredient. And coupled with that on sort of the medical level was that the doctors in Boston, for some reason, all want to use hormone therapy, even for prostate cancers that are low or moderate risk. And as Bob Martini said, that's a little bit like using the atom bomb on a fly. So, my family has a history of diabetes and cardiovascular disease, so it really didn't seem to make much sense to me to take on those additional risks. But perhaps even more importantly is the spiritual aspect. And MGH, or Massachusetts General Hospital, is a very secular institution.
An outstanding institution.
Outstanding. I mean, you can't. The word on the street is that MGH stands for man's greatest hospital. And there's a touch of arrogance that exists there. And that, whereas Loma Linda, where the whole credo is to make man whole, was very attractive to us.
An undergirding philosophy to make man whole, right. Treating the whole person.
Treating the whole person.
So this was attractive to you. I mean, you saw the difference, not only in the experience, but really in the undergirding philosophy here at Loma Linda.
Yeah.
Okay.
I mean, MGH tries to do that by offering seminars and research libraries and whatnot, but it doesn't have the juice.
Yeah.
And it was the juice that really attracted us. And when we came out for our consult in mid-January, we walked up to the front of the hospital, and there, just to the right of the entrance, is an incredible statue called "Come Unto Me," and Jesus is sitting on a bench, surrounded by two kids, and there are other frail individuals or lame people who are in the midst of walking towards him. And he's radiant. He's just radiant. And the people are so full of hope and joy to be in his presence. And I walked into the midst of that statue.
First time.
First time. And I started to cry. And I've noticed that response in other times that I've walked in there, that I've started to cry. It's such a powerful experience.
Well,
and that has been our experience here, is that the Spirit of Jesus permeates the caregivers in this medical center.
Well, I'm glad that's been your experience, because that's what we want.
Yeah.
You know, we're continuing the teaching and healing work of Jesus here on earth, and Seventh-day Adventists are in healing ministry all around the world, here at Loma Linda for 100 years. Well, tell us a little bit about while you've been here. I mean, you've been a prostate cancer patient, and your treatments are just lasting a little while during the daytime. What have you been doing while you've been here? And I know you've been pretty active in doing a number of different things.
Yes. Well, I decided a good way to keep busy while I was here is to train for a half marathon. So I've been getting out there on Barton Road and getting to know all the hills pretty well. And it's just a wonderful place to run, really incredible. And so I've been having a good time
So
doing
you've
that.
been, and the whole time you've been undergoing treatment, she's been training for this half marathon.
That's right.
Great, that is great. So tell us what you've been doing in addition to the treatment.
Well,
Now the treatments take place in the gantry or the fixed beam line.
right.
Healing is a process, far more than just the treatment.
Yeah.
So we have many different things that are part of that process. What have you been doing?
Well, I've also been working full-time, telecommuting with my work
Back
and
east.
clients back east. So that's been keeping me busy 8 or 10 hours a day. But one of the things that we were told at the outset is get over to the gym and work out if you can on a daily basis.
In
And-
fact, I tell you, if you're having 5 treatments a week, we want you there 3 to 5 times unless
Yeah.
the doctor tells you otherwise.
Well, I'm an overachiever, so
Okay, I thought you might be. I just thought you might be. So, what have you been doing?
well, there's a great group of people over there that run a class called Boot Camp, and Boot Camp has really been wonderful. It is, I've been able to convert a lot of fat into muscle. About 7 or 8 pounds of my body weight has been turned into muscle thanks to
Wonderful.
the exercises. And when I first came here, I had arthroscopic surgery on my left knee in early December, and I was still limping. Thanks to the training that they got me through, I'm now running. In fact, last week I ran 15 miles.
15 miles.
During the week,
Congratulations.
so-
Here, I thought it was the treatments they were doing. That's marvelous. And
So-
15 miles.
Yeah.
And then, in addition to that, I mean, we've really enjoyed being with each other. You know,
You have some quality time. I mean,
Quality time.
everybody leads busy lives, and one's going this way and one's going that way. And all of a sudden, people come together, and they've been married for 10, 20, 30, 40 years. And the first time that they're ever together in one place 24/7. We call it a testing time.
oh my goodness!
But you're right. You're able to spend some quality time and
Yeah.
really reflect. Life goes by too fast under the best of circumstances.
Yeah, yeah.
So, what other things have you been participating in? That's part of the healing process.
Well, your Wednesday night,
The Wednesday night educational
Gathering.
support group.
yeah, which is fabulous.
Now, you've got a family, and they knew that you've had cancer. I'm sure the family and possibly the church has been praying for you.
Yes.
Your people at work have been very concerned about you.
Yeah.
And I often tell our patients, don't tell the people back home how you're really doing. Because while you're out here, they're going to be praying for you, and they're going to send flowers and candy and fruit baskets. And,
all the get well
and
cards.
get well cards and almost condolences. But when they find out how you're really doing, they'll stop doing that. And
Right.
I was mentioning this once recently in a Wednesday night meeting, and one of the patients said, "That's true." He said, "I went home about a month ago. My name was on the prayer list in the bulletin. I went home last week, and they take my name off the prayer list." And so there's a lot of things that are going on. Now, for the listening audience, now that you've had cancer, what difference is it making to you?
Well, every day is sweeter. My relationships are sweeter. My time with my wife is sweeter. You have a different perspective on life because you're that much closer to death. And
The clock is always ticking,
right,
but somehow when you hear you're diagnosed, you hear the clock clearer than ever before. There's a time frame to this thing, and it's not as long as I thought it might be.
Mm-hmm.
So what you're saying is your whole perspective has changed.
yeah. And going back to why I was laughing, I feel closer to the Lord,
It's much closer. Wonderful.
and I'm very grateful.
Well, the Lord's there. He's always working on our behalf. And sometimes, there's things that happen in our life that really get our attention.
Right.
And, God's got some wonderful plans. What difference is this making to you?
Well, I agree that I think we had been going along in our busy lives and passing in the night
Yeah.
in some respects. And it makes me realize how short life is. And the other thing that it has made me realize with Ellie telling us about Loma Linda is it has reinforced my belief in angels
Right.
and in miracles. And it just is incredible to me. You have said on a number of occasions, everyone is here. We're not here by accident. And we truly were not here by accident. And it just, I am so thrilled with knowing the people at the church and that this has happened, that it also has made me feel much closer to God.
Oh, that is wonderful. Well, in our closing moments here, Chris, what would you tell any of the men that are out there in the listening audience about their own health and taking responsibility for their health?
I would say that it's important to be proactive. You are your own advocate.
That's
I
right.
had a spreadsheet of my PSA scores over the last dozen years, tracking them. And when they began to jump, it was when I started to get concerned. They never got above 4, which is the cutoff.
Right.
So be your own advocate. Track your health and track the indices.
Monitor it, and keep track of the whole thing.
That's right. And then when you have a suspicion, go to the urologist and make sure that he does a biopsy or she does a biopsy.
Being proactive is the key. And Chris and Alice here, again, one of the examples of the many, many people here that come to Loma Linda, and they feel the impact of the medical ministry that's going on here. And it's drawn them closer to each other. I mean, they're diagnosed with cancer, and this whole experience has brought them closer to each other and closer to God. For those of you that are looking on, I'm Lynn Martell with Journey of Hope, and I want to tell you that God has a plan for you and for your life. Look to Him. Give Him an opportunity. He's waiting to help you. Until next week, God bless you each one. Thank you for being with us. Thank you.